And we're going to move on to the next keynote session, which is the architecture designing to meet 1.5 degrees Celsius. And, you know, I think that with the session that we just went through, we certainly have a sense about the importance that the design teams play in really sort of setting the direction of these projects. And you know, architects and engineers and landscape architects and planners can't do it all, but we have such a pivotal role in sort of setting the direction of projects and bringing the project teams together and kind of coordinating that effort that it's a critical part of this climate solution to really have the design teams focused on how to really be part of this climate solution and to be part of this reset to the 1.5 degrees by 2040. And so I'm very, very pleased and honored to be joined by two terrific panelists here this morning. We've got with us Leung, who's the firm-wide director of the Sustainability Engineering Studio at Skidmore, Owings & Merrill, based in Chicago. And Luke, great to see you again, been a while. And then also we're joined by Kongjian Yu, who is the design principal of Tuernscape and founder and professor at the Beijing University College of Architecture and Landscape. And Kongjian, your work, the reputation of your fabulous work precedes you. So with that, I'd like to really invite Luke and Kongjian to join us here. They'll start with about a 15-minute presentation each, and then we'll wrap up the session with some questions again. So with that, Luke, the screen is yours.
I think you can hear me. If not, then
yep,
somebody let me know. So we would like to share with you today. The discussion will be summarized in one word. This is the word. It's the Chinese word peace. Now the Chinese word peace is made up of two individual words. On the left is the grain of rice. On the right side is the mouth. Now let me tell you this. In Chinese culture and in Asia in general, if there's no rice to eat, chances are you're not gonna have peace. But this carries a larger, deeper meaning than just that. It carries the meaning that peace will not come until the left of nature will thrive together with human on the right. Looking back into what happened in the last 20 years, there's certainly room for improvement. We are seeing the rapid growth of China and India as Asian countries. In 20 years, China and India together became almost 1/3 of the carbon emission of the world. What's going to happen from now till 2050? The projection is there will be continued growth in China and India in energy demand. In fact, Asia will become a more dominant player, with China leading the way and India follow right behind it. But if we look at, as discussion earlier, about how we're going to get to a net zero future, while we're seeing this rapid growth in Asia and China and India, we actually want them to do this. Rapid reduction of their carbon to 2050. If we focus on the 340 gigatons of carbon as the budget of the future, this is what China needs to do, and that's what India needs to do, the leading two countries in Asia. And that is about roughly 1/3 of the global carbon budget in order to get to a 2040 net zero future. So is that possible? In our company, we have these 10 design principles that's going to guide, we thought, not only just on carbon, but a better world by 2040. Now we're going to talk about 5 of them today that's going to impact carbon, and we're going to take China as an example. But the important thing here is the leader in China is committed to it. They want to implement a proactive national strategies against climate change. So with the leader committed to it, this is the first or one of the first pieces that you saw is this Xiong'an, the idea of a Millennium City in China that guide China into this net zero future. So there's new cities that they are planning to be net zero, and that's great. How about existing cities? Now, what you're looking at the screen right now is the study that SOM did. You might have seen study like that before, but it's focused on transportation. In this study, what we did is we picked 400 cities in the world, and it includes both operating carbon in the sense of transportation carbon and energy use, not embodied carbon. Well, what did we find? Now, first you notice is the cities, as it gets denser, it rapidly drop in their carbon emission. And then as you turn the corner, then it's kind of diminishing in terms of return is not as rapid as the density keep going. So where we are with some of the Chinese cities, that's we are with Shanghai and Beijing. You can tell there's certainly room for them to improve. And partially it's because of the energy grid, the renewable component is not as strong. And if you go further south to Shenzhen, when the energy grid is cleaner, they are much closer to the frontier of possibility. So putting renewable energy is important in China to replace coal. How has been China doing? So I'm glad to tell you that this is the result in 2018. If you look at the chart, almost no countries can get to 200 gigawatts of installation of renewable energy in that year in 2018, except European Union composed of multiple countries. They exceeded that 200 gigawatt mark. Well, what about China in 2018? Well, this is China. It doubled the 200 mark and actually became almost 1/3 of the renewable energy installation in 2018. And amazingly, this only happened not 10 years, it's within the last 5-6 years. You can see the rapid growth of PV installation in China. So they meant business. With all those rapid installation, we are only seeing about 8% of wind and solar powering the country right now, certainly room to grow, though renewable energy is 27% of the country's portfolio in the electricity grid, composed mostly of conventional hydro. China today is almost 30% on renewable energy. We can certainly see in the next 20 years, the renewable energy can be increased to maybe 50, 60%. And then with the reduction of the another 40, 50%, they could be net zero. And we're designing buildings to start thinking about this new future, aligned with all electric building. On this three here, they are northern city or maybe a more northern city, so they need heating. So they are designed with heat pump, which is 2 times more efficient as boilers, air source heat pump. Now you wonder, all electric building, is it possible to build the tallest buildings all electric? Well, let me tell you this, back to where I came from in Chicago, the Willis Tower, the John Hancock Tower, the Trump Tower, the 3 tallest in Chicago, they are all electric. In fact, John Hancock Tower was built in 1965 and it was all electric building. So that's absolutely possible. More importantly, in Huangpu area in China and multiple cities in China, they are setting up this platform for building to share energy. Now in this Huangpu district in Shanghai, there are 1,787 buildings. Almost 82 million square meters of buildings are sharing their energy on the same platform that you can see. With one platform connecting all these big buildings information, some of you remember what Ed talked about these tall buildings and the carpet. Basically, what they did is connect all these tall buildings together. So in the future, they can actually cap the carbon emission and do a demand limiting to work this building all as a whole through a smart city to control how much carbon you consume at any time. Have you ever seen any cities in any part of the world that's able to do that? Now, fun fact for you, we believe doing net zero carbon emission in China may be a little bit easier than US. You know why? It's because of the people. What about the people? Well, how about this? The male and female in China, in average, they are about 20% less wage than the Americans. So it's just the ecological footprint, and it takes just less energy to heat and cool and less energy to travel around. Moving away from the operating energy to the embodied energy is important to prioritize efficiency and specify responsibility material. Now, this is Weibang in Shenzhen. As you can see, we use a lot of wood as part of the material in the building. The reason is because in China, almost 50% of the steel and 50% of the cement is used in building and infrastructure, and it contributes to 2% of the global carbon emission for steel and 1.6% of the global carbon emission for cement. How do we reduce that? In one of these super tall buildings in Tianjin, what we did was we craft the building form to work with the wind, and in wind tunnel testing, we were able to do the structural steel reduction of 40% with less outriggers and also no dampers needed. So it's the craftsmanship of this building that enabled us to do that. And we didn't stop at structure. In terms of MEP, we are seeing not that many MEP equipment and body carbon information out there. So a bunch of MEP engineers, the international engineers, we are gathering together, start writing letters. You will see it later on in the fall, and we're going to release it first in America, asking for equipment manufacturer to provide their equipment and body carbons so that they can prioritize to use them, so that we can see what are the equipments and body carbon is lower. The third, the transportation. In China right now, in this Beijing Bohai Innovation City and many Chinese cities, they are already connected by high-speed rail to make them efficient to travel around different cities without using the airplane. But we are seeing more. We are seeing the electrification of their vehicles. In this case, you can see their growth. Within like 4 or 5 years, it became one of the major installation and global stock of electric cars in China. They are really pushing for it. In fact, they have a code. In the code, it said if you design certain residential building, 100% of the reserve should be for electric vehicles. So you have to design for that. And 10% for public building. On many of the projects we are doing, we are pushing for already 15 to 20% of the electric provision for the vehicles are all electric. Compared to some of the US development, we are seeing maybe 5%. So China definitely has a push and a system to try to get this going stronger. More importantly, in some of the cities we are working in China, they actually plan for only 10% private vehicle. The rest are public and electric. So you can see that push towards the electric transportation system in the future. But it's not just the human side of things. We also have to protect the nature. In this case, it's the Yellow River corridor in Jinan. We actually try to conserve the nature and the flowing of the Yellow River through China. And kudos to the Chinese. While the world is seeing deforestation, in China, in this area, in Mao Wushu Desert, 93% of the desert, 42,000 square meters had become oases. It is the size of Netherlands, which is on the top right corner of the screen right now. Why is it important? Because in the last 7,800 years, the total carbon as a consequence of desertification was between 450 and 500 gigatons, more than the entire amount of fossil fuel carbon it generates. So to be able to prevent desertification and grow back the plants is a strong way to move us against this carbon emission in the future. So also cities need to be livable within short distance of transportation. In this Nanhu new community village, what we did is we developed this 15-minute city where you can do most of the things in 15 minutes and minimize your transportation. So is this all new? No, actually, in starting 15 years ago, we started working on near zero building, the Pearl River Tower we designed. Now we got record and actual consumption to show how it works. In the occupied area, it's actually 28% more efficient than the province target of 120 kilowatt hour per square meter. And the entire building only consumes about 54.3 kilowatt hour per square meter, or about 55% efficient compared to 120 kilowatt hour per square meter of the target of the province. You know, when we first went to China about 20 some years ago, what can 20 years bring to a city? So this is the first building we did in Shanghai Jinmao Tower. When we did it, finished in about 1999, roughly 2000. It was still like that in the 90s, but it is like that today. If a city or a country can make that many changes, that much changes in 20 years, you bet they can do a lot more to make the city and the country more renewable in the future. So as we look at Song'an, this Millennium City by Xi Jinping as a model city in the history of human development, we are seeing as the city and China go through the cycle of life, move down from now to 2040 into the future, we see the potential carbon generation can be offset by the carbon elimination. And finally, we'll achieve to a place where human and nature will finally thrive together to have peace. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Luke. That was absolutely terrific. So now we're going to switch gears and go to Kongjian Yu. You look like you're all set, Kongjian. You want to share your screen and take it away?
Yes. So I look have a very nice setup for what I'm going to talk. My talk is about nature-based solutions inspired by ancient wisdom. I like Carl's talk about society is a globe, it's a whole globe, not just the building, not just a city, but a whole globe is our common site. So I'm going to continue to talk about that. So we have challenges, climate challenges, but together we have other challenges which are all associated with flood, drought, pollution, even COVID-19, of course. Over 80% of Chinese cities are suffering air pollution. So Luke talk about energy saving, but together with energy, we have a whole bunch set of other problems. So we have to think a way to solve the problem altogether. Yet climate change is nothing new. So is man's struggle to finding solutions to survive. In the Chinese legend mythology, we have two figures we worshipped. The mother goddess, Nuo, who created a method to fix the sky. And the male figure, the great Yu, the great, who actually is an architect, a planner. And he knows how to build the cities and surviving flood, indicating two strategies to climate change, mitigation and adaptation. The female mitigation, the male adaptation. So we're happy we have two figures here. So we have accumulated all this kind of wisdom dealing with the changing climate. For example, Pearl River Delta, Luke just mentioned. We are able to build cities and villages in the marsh, live with nature. and cultivate this land and turn it to a beautiful, productive, most productive, most livable Pearl River Delta area. And for individual building, for example, we have developed these all kind of building technologies, low tech, of course, light well for air conditioning and ventilations. And even we know how to build a threshold as an adaptive solution to protect the building from being flooded, 100-year flood, even huge flood. Unfortunately, such kind of climate mitigation and adaptation wisdom are usually now being buried under layers of modern industrial technology, or even totally ignored. We have dumped tons and billion tons of cement into the rivers and building dams and building all these so-called pipe systems and replace all these ancient green-based, nature-based solutions. But such a kind of gray infrastructure is not only lack of resiliency, but very expensive. In the name of preventing floods, China has channelized most of the rivers running through its urban areas. But now we have more than cities suffering flood each year. If this model is adopted more widely, how much more cement will be dumped into the river in the developing countries, in the monsoon world, and how many cities will be built of concrete without any resilience. You can see how much we waste so much material in order to build something we call infrastructure. So we need alternatives, and the alternative is green infrastructure, and nature-based holistic solutions, we call it ecological infrastructure, that are critical for securing the ecosystem's services, including provision, regulating, life supporting, and cultural services. That's we imagine we have alternative infrastructure. And this must go across the scale, national scale, even global scale, of course, and its regional and individual community levels. Inspired by the ancient farming wisdom, replicable modules have been developed to solve the climate change problem and other problems altogether. And they must be applied replicable across the scale, at a massive scale, in an inexpensive way. From a small scale all the way to the national scale. So the farmers know how to do it. You know, one little tool, you can transform the whole global service. For example, terracing. For over 20 years, we have tested and built over 500 projects in more than 200 cities in China and some parts of the world, and showcased numerous replicable models for healing and transforming our land at various scales. I just give 3 examples how the nature-based solutions can replace the gray infrastructure to turn gray into green and inexpensive and effective. So one solution is make friends with flood, nature-based, remove the concrete, replace it with terraces inspired by farming, terraced wetland system. So we remove the concrete and turn the riverbank into a terraced riverbank, which actually can make friends with monsoon flood, the monsoon storm. So here you can see the walls, flood wall is being removed, and you create a buffer zones which allow 20-year, 200-year flood to take over. Because monsoon climate only need sometimes 1 week or even 1 day for flood. So the rest of the time can be used for people, for the city. So this is a project we built, and you can see how it's been tested. There's 100-year flood. The city flooded, partly flooded, and this is 20-year flood as is dry season. So the city become more floodable with minimum concrete wall and make a space for nature, but at the same time share with urban use, with people's use. So we tested the performance, of course. And if we take this kind of green solution, we can actually reduce the risk, at least 50% flood risk. So how much can be changed if nature-based solution is to be implemented nationwide? How less concrete can be used? You can see, imagine. The second case is water cleansing. Landscape as the living system. Looking for affordable and fast solution to urban water issues. Imagine at least 3% of energy is used to treat sewage water in the developed countries in Europe. And then now we have 75% of surface water is contaminated in China. And global-wise, 85% of sewage water is untreated and dumped into water. So that's a great amount of energy can be saved if we can create a nature-based solution. Landscape as a living system. So this is a case, this is a showcase in Shanghai, in the Shanghai Expo about 10 years ago. The Huangpu River is polluted, the site is contaminated, and we are inspired by the ancient wisdom of terracing, the field, the rice paddy, and we clean the water, create such a kind of nature-based living system, turn the 5th grade water into 3rd grade water, which is swimmable, unpotable but swimmable, and sourced to the sink. And the whole system is built based on nature. So the aeration system, the terraces that are irrigated by the contaminated water, is the water basically nutrient, carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus, and the growing, and terracing, growing, and producing the clean water. 1 hectare of such kind of strengthened wetland can produce 800 cubic meters of clean water. Imagine how much energy you can save. Now this is a test. We have 10 years data to show how this continue to be a functional solution. Imagine how much energy can be needed to clean up such huge lakes in China, for example, Taihu Lake, and the ocean. For example, Bohai Ocean in China is heavily contaminated. It's virtually a dead sea now. So that's, we can imagine the alternative solution to solve the problem without consuming too much energy. The third case, I want to show you how this green-based, nature-based solution to create green home, a low carbon or zero carbon. Luke just mentioned zero carbon home, a small solution for big problems. We have, in China, we have 50 billion cubic square meters, 50 billion square meters of buildings, and 2 billion square meter increase every year. But almost only 1% of them are energy efficient. So buildings, you can imagine green building how much energy can be saved. So this is my test for my own apartment in Beijing. Collect stormwater and solar energy and turn the balcony into a productive vegetable garden. Not only that, we also recycle the water, and the water go into the building, the living wall, go living room, and turn the living wall into an air conditioner. So this is a balcony producing vegetable. This is a water collection system. The storm water collection. This is my own bedroom. You can see this is my living room. Now this is a living wall which clean air, which also humidifies the air because Beijing is very dry in the winter. and also very hot in summer. So cool off the building at the same time. And it's a glowing wall. It's also produce a kind of a geomass. This geomass is a kind of gas that can cure depression, by the way. So it's a whole ecosystem, a nature-based living air conditioning system in the building. That's today, you will see, a small solution can solve the problem. Now this has become a learning center for my own community. People come here to learn and to be educated and build their own apartment like that. So small solution for big problems. This home collect 52 tons of rainwater, save 2,000 kilowatt of electricity, and produce 32 kilograms of vegetable. If every building is green, low tech, and it can save about 30% of national energy consumption. In that way, we can remove all the so-called hydropowers because it destroys a whole water system in China. Now that's not enough. So beyond the design practice, we have to begin with a political campaign, changes the policies, changes. So we propose Sponge City in 2003, and we write letters to the mayor and presidents, to the prime ministers. I propose what we call the negative planning, which is nature-based solution. We needed to have an ecological system. And thank to Michael Sorkin, who have translated these letters and now available in English. That's my thank to and in memory of Michael Sorkin, of course. And this proposal have been sent to Premier Wen Jiabao about 15 years ago, and virtually initiates the national security pattern planning for ecological system in China. And these have been translated into at least 4 state regulations and laws, like the protection of ecological red lines and so on. So we try to think like a king, because we have to take care of the whole territory, the whole globe, the whole land. But we have to act like a peasant. Now I'm still thinking myself as a farmer, as a peasant, because we are doer. We have to really by small solution, by little piece, and actually it can transform the whole surface of the globe. And so the threat of climate change gives us an opportunity to rediscover the hard, warm, ancient knowledge and bring it to bear on a challenge. The world has never been seen before. Even more important, it is helping us not just rediscover, but actually strengthen the connection between nature and people. So I agree with Carl. It's a paradigm shift, and more than ever, it is clear that it is paradigm shift in planning and designing our city to adapt to the changing climate and solving the multiple urban ecological issues. Such a shift calls for rethinking of the way we building our cities based on industrial technologies. The shift challenging traditional design practices, technically, aesthetically, and ethically. It will revolutionize the moral criteria and the value that professionals are compelled to follow in practice. And I'm happy to know that AIA actually doing that. It will require design languages and design forms that are not only climate positive, but also aesthetically inspiring. That's my talk. Thank you. Hello.
Well, thank you so much, both of you, Kongjian and Luke. Terrific presentations. Kongjian, you can stop sharing your screen, and Luke, will you come back on your camera?
Yep.
And let's join together here. So we've got a few minutes for a question, and I just want to go right to what I think that both of you, sort of the heart of what both of you are talking about here, and that is we have this job to do in decarbonizing the world, but it's an opportunity for an endless list of associated benefits. And that is the sort of the mind change, the mindset change that I think that both of you are talking about in your own ways. You care to comment on that, Luke? You have thought is that a fair thing to say about your work?
Yeah, I think the idea of human and nature has to thrive together is record in not only the Chinese culture. If you look at the Western culture, no matter from the idea of heaven in Christianity, Judaism, or Islam, it's all about a garden with river. But more importantly, if you look at we know there's deforestation in the last 20 years in Amazon, in many locations of the world. But NASA in 2019 come out and said the green area has been increasing on Earth. And the reason is because of Chinese and India. So I think this Asian country has this mindset of going back to the history of how human and nature thrive together. Hopefully we do not forget about that as we move into the future.
Hugely important. Kongjian, you want to add a thought to that?
Yeah. Well, I totally agree. So, but there's a challenge here. As I said, now in China we are talking about the ecological civilization. Ecological civilizations after industrial civilization. So how we it's really talk about how we use natural, based on nature, make wise use of nature. And but that's not enough. We have ancient culture. We certainly have ancient knowledge, but those knowledge is basically based on experience. So we have to understand we need to upgrade those wisdom. We need to upgrade those knowledge. So the low tech actually is a high tech. The low tech is a high tech. So when I'm talking about how can we standardize those ancient wisdom, and how can we strengthen or emphasize or enforce those ancient wisdom to become a really a contemporary, applicable solutions for today's design? It's really challenging, and it's a for future's innovation field. I think that's an exciting field. I'm really excited about that. Yeah.
So I feel like I just have to take a moment here and channel Ed Mazaria. And that in his own exploration as an architect, he moved to New Mexico and he saw the work of the indigenous cultures, that just things like Mesa Verde, which is probably the best known one, of building buildings that were protected by a cliff and that were oriented to the sunlight and so on. And it totally turned the light bulb on in his head that resulted in him writing the Passive Solar Design Handbook, et cetera. And it is this this high technology of low technology. It's work with nature. Let's stop fighting nature. As Luke put it so well, this kind of 20th century muscle. We're going to muscle through every problem by adding more energy to it. And let's be a little gentler about it and welcome the sunlight in and welcome the rain from the skies and really be part of nature in our urban systems.
Love it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But as I said, it's still challenging. We are not nostalgic. We have to really have a new innovation, just inspired by those. Yeah. But how can you integrate it into the contemporary city and the buildings? It's still challenging. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I know if we had another hour, we could talk about food production and bringing that together. But so once again, we're learning how quickly time goes when there's fascinating people talking about amazing work. So again, I just want to thank you both, Luke and Kongjian, for these terrific presentations and spending time with us here today. Just a fantastic 40 minutes. Thank you so much.